This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.
Hey media, we need a rewrite. I'm Erin Trafford, and this is The Fourth Draft. Welcome to Season 2, Episode 5 of The Fourth Draft. I'm your host, Erin Trafford, your media strategist in your pocket. I'm also the CEO of Story Studio Network, where we produce some of the best in-class branded podcast content in the country. I'm just going to say it. I'm going to be bold and say that. You know why? Because we've just had the stick-to-itiveness to stay with it for as long as we have. We have been doing this for so long, we're now considered like OGs. We're the OG podcast producers, and we don't produce podcasts the way other folks produce podcasts. So I'm just tooting my own horn here because I'm so dang proud of the team and what we have been accomplishing, since we set out on our mission years ago. And mission is something we're going to talk about today on this episode of The Fourth Draft. Today, I want to get real and talk with you about this relatively heady concept. So my goal and my challenge is over the next 20 minutes to start bringing this down to eye level for you. But we're going to talk about moving beyond this concept of awareness and education and into a world where you're thinking about your media strategy through the lens of two things. There's a lot of A words today, by the way, and that's not on purpose. It just is the way it is. Awareness, audience. We're going to talk about how to flip the lens on all of this so that your audience becomes an asset, not because they are enormous or they see your stuff or because they are aware of your stuff, but because of their willingness to be advocates for you, to take up your brand as their own. You could go all into the media theory of this and the McLuhanism of it all, where, the medium is the massage. And if you're consuming content and it's free, then you are the product. We could get into that. We're not going to go down the media theory route, even though the nerd in me really, really, really wants to. But I want this episode to be super tangible and takeawayable for you. So here's the problem. Here's the problem that we're trying to solve today. And I say problem with a small p. This isn't like, solving world peace problem, but this is a consideration that if you come at it through the right lens and the right angle when you're planning your strategy, just even considering what I'm going to tell you over the next 20 minutes is going to help you become a better communicator, especially if you try to communicate complex things. Okay. We're not selling widgets here. We're communicating really complex issues that may have a lot of cooks in the kitchen. I say that a lot. There may be a lot of different pressures. There's a lot of considerations and a lot of things at play. And when you're dealing in complexity, the problem is that often I see organizations fall into the trap of stopping at awareness. So what does that look like? That looks like, hey guys, be aware. Housing, for example, is a complex issue. And that's where the communication stops. Okay, walk me through that complexity in a way that I can not only understand, i.e. be educated, in a way that keeps me understanding, entertained, not bored, not speaking over my grade level, meeting me where I am, making it matter to me. I talk a lot about mattering, right? That's how you got to come at it. You've got to make sure that you're hitting all of these marks, because awareness does not actually inspire the action. The action is inspired once you've educated them, once you've entertained them, once you've aligned them with your values. And when you've hit all of that, what have you created? You have created a person who is going to advocate for you. And advocate, I don't mean like go out there with a placard and stand in front of Parliament Hill. That might be the advocacy that you're looking for. Advocacy can be as simple as believing so deeply in what they have shared with you in terms of their experience of your brand and your message and how you've delivered it to them, that they tell someone else. And I'll give you a great example out of my own life. All right. I have been on a pretty significant personal health journey over the last 18 months. I hit a wall with a condition at the end of 2023 that had been percolating for about 18 months prior to that. And I was told by the doctor, you have one choice, one of two choices. You can either be on medication that's very expensive, very hard to get, doesn't have really good efficacy rates, or you can make gigantic changes to the way that you're living your life. So I chose the gigantic change because I was not a fan of being on medication for the rest of my life. And it led me down a path of becoming aligned with a whole bunch of new brands that I didn't know about before. Supplement brands, fitness brands, lifestyle enhancement brands, I'll call them that. And I would dig into their content. I'd listen to their podcast. I'd read their reviews. I'd talk to other people about them. And then eventually I'd make a decision to buy from them. And that's where we think this all ends. You can replace that with a not-for-profit, kind of like a charitable donation journey where you learn about the problem. You see somebody at the grocery store line who doesn't have enough to pay their bill. So there's a food issue. And then you maybe are scrolling on your phone and you see something about a local food bank or a community fridge. We have one of those in Eastern Passage where I live in Nova Scotia. It's a wonderful resource. And you go and you put some food items in the fridge, or you donate to the local food bank, and that's where it ends. So this goes both ways. Like it doesn't matter what kind of action you're looking for. That's an awareness play. But where you really capture this concept of advocacy, whether you're looking at it through the lens of a big A or a little a advocacy, it doesn't really matter, is where you have empowered that person so much in their shared values with you that then the mission becomes shared. Now, with back to my story with my lifestyle brands, I have come across a community of women who are just like me, who are in their 40s, some who have health challenges, some who just want to be healthy. We're all there for different reasons. But it has changed my life so dramatically in such a positive way that I now tell anyone who will ask me about this wonderful group that I'm in. And I don't do it because I'm trying to sell anyone into the group. I don't actually even think I've brought anybody into the group. I do it because I'm so proud of the mission and the values that group has and what it's meant for me personally. It has changed me being part of that group. And that is advocacy. And if you are listening really intently, you'll notice a couple key characteristics in that anecdote. Number one, the advocacy came about because all of a sudden the shared experience of values started to mean something personal to me. It all comes back to the personalization for your audience. It has to mean something to them at the basest of levels. That's where the emotional resonance comes in. So I'm also going to remind you of something that I have said, and I keep saying this, I'm like, I can't remember when I said it this season, but I have said it this season, about if your content is only appealing to one end of the emotional spectrum. So, a great example is Disney doesn't tell sad stories. Disney is only doing happy marketing, okay? They only like that one end of the emotional spectrum. And I would argue that that doesn't always work for them, because then you see movies like Inside Out, right? They have to put something out there that acknowledges that the world is not all princesses and knights in shining armor. It's not. Kids experience crazy big emotions. I have 2 little girls. I see it every single day. Oh my goodness, the emotions, right? So if your content is only appealing to that base emotion of sadness, of guilt, of worry, of fear. Oh my gosh, I could do a whole episode just on appealing to fear. The shared experience you're creating for that person is one of anxious fraughtness. You're basing that connection and that advocacy on something that will not hold water. You need to create a fulsome experience. So hook them in with the fear, but then make sure the rest of the content that you're hitting them with, the rest of the storytelling that you're hitting them with, allows them to experience the spectrum with you. Then they get to decide how they're going to experience the rest of your brand, the rest of your story. So with my health journey, I could have been like, oh my God, this is so hard every day. This is grind, grind, grind. But no, what I've done instead is chosen that I'm now a member of a community of women who supports me 4 times a week in doing things that I never have done before. And I come at it through a sense of pride, of ownership. Not over this is hard. Some of them do. Some of them love the burn, right? What I'm saying is you have to think about how that awareness is driving them further down that connective tissue of your mission and vision. It is critical, because awareness is no longer enough to create meaningful action. And it certainly is not going to help your visibility going forward. So, shifting from awareness to advocacy. Awareness, I'm just going to give you a few little key things to think about. Awareness is great for visibility because it does get you seen. Those fearful, tear-jerky, whatever stories, they do get the eyeballs, but it's passive. It is the advocacy that creates the ripple effect. It is the advocacy that lets your story be bigger than you are. It amplifies your message in ways that you cannot anticipate, and typically in positive ways. Advocacy also happens when your audience feels this personal investment. It has to be personal. So, to reiterate a point, if that person does not want to resonate constantly with fear or with guilt, and I'd argue that 99% of us don't want to constantly resonate with fear and with guilt, you're not going to create an advocate. They're going to turn you off. You need to give them a spectrum of their experience. It's not just about your message. It's about their stake in it and them wanting to claim that stake. I did not want to claim a stake in a fitness community that was going to make me feel like I had to hustle and hurt and sacrifice and feel the burn. I wanted to invest in a community that, was going to push me past my limits, but was also going to acknowledge that I'm a woman in my 40s, that sometimes my kids and my dog walk into class, that there are some mornings I'm going to wake up and it's going to be a shit show getting the kids out the door, and I'm going to miss class, but that's going to celebrate the fact that I pick that back up again at 4:00 later that afternoon. I am invested personally, not just because of one emotional message. So, how do you start to turn this corner? How do you start to drive them further down that below the surface advocacy iceberg? I use that image intentionally, right? Because the awareness is the part of the iceberg that you're aware of. It's the part that's floating above the surface. The advocacy is that deep, deep, deep part that's oftentimes way larger. So start by doing this. Identify the folks you already have who are your most loyal supporters. Who are the ones who are consistently showing up for you? Who are the ones that are consistently championing your message? Who are the ones who are not just liking your content and engaging with your content in ways that don't mean anything, but who are the ones who are actually being very thoughtful about what you're saying, asking questions? You might think that's annoying. That's an advocate in waiting. Advocacy starts by identifying that inner circle. Empower them. Start to give them tools to do the work of amplifying your message. This is why sometimes, not all the time, clients will come to us and say, okay, how do we promote our podcast? And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's such a loaded question. It is a loaded question because it quite literally is different for every single show we do, depending on a multitude of factors. But one thing that consistently works is if you are in a niche or you've got a very specific message, the one thing that works every single time is we have throughout production and development, we have the client develop a huge list of folks who like them. They don't have to be in your niche. They don't have to do what you do. They don't have to be people you want to sell to. They're people who like you, who are proud of you, who would have supper with you, who would come to your event, who would go sell tickets for you. Those people, get us a list of 50 or 60 people like that. I'm certain you can figure out who they are. And we're going to tell them about your show. We're going to tell them about your show. And you know what's going to happen? They're going to advocate for you. And they're going to share that show because they're proud of you and they emotionally resonate with you and they understand the full broad picture of you and or your organization. It starts with your most loyal circle. And if you don't have that right now, then you should cultivate it. And you're probably not ready for a podcast yet. You probably need a different kind of strategy at this point. But you're going to arm them with these tools to be better advocates for you. And then the last step is, how can you think about this going forward? How can you create more content that energizes people to move from that awareness down to that advocacy? I can tell you that it relies on you keeping on with educating them, keeping them entertained, and telling them what you want them to do. Because they'll do it for you. They'll do it for you. So where in your current communications and media stack are you doing that? Aces, 5 stars. Are you not doing that? All right, let's sit down and revisit. Because the more you can do that with every single piece of content that you put out, back to the beginning, the more your audience becomes an asset for you. The more you start to build a community of people, the more what you're actually cultivating is a give and take relationship where everybody wins by participating. You win because you get incredible results from your messaging. Your audience wins because they get to become advocates for something they truly believe in, and it enriches their lives as a result. Everybody wins when you move past awareness. So the next question you're going to have is, okay, Erin, this is great, but how do we measure this? Well, we've talked about this already. I mentioned this, I think, in episode 1 of season 2, but this is going to require you getting very crystal clear about what you're measuring and why. Your fancy dashboard that's measuring impressions and reel views and YouTube short views and all that stuff, it's probably not going to do the trick anymore. That will be just your awareness metric, which isn't nothing, but it's not all the things anymore. You want to start looking at things like repeat engagement. You want to start looking at things that are conversion metrics like advocacy actions. Those numbers are going to be a lot smaller than your awareness numbers, than your impression numbers. They're not going to be massive, but they're going to be meaningful. At Story Studio Network, we look at 2 trust-based metrics: time spent listening and cost of attention. How much is it costing you to keep the attention of your strongest, biggest fans? It's usually not a lot of money. You're usually paying out the wazoo to simply get awareness from people who don't give a shit about you and never really will. You got to start balancing that off with how much attention are you capturing with the people who actually share your mission, who are actually going to help you. They're your advocates. Trust, remember, trust is the foundation. Advocacy is the outcome. When your people advocate for you, means they trust you enough to bring others into the fold. They trust you enough to stand beside you and your brand values. That is humongous. So, advocacy is part of that trust metric. It shows that your audience believes in you enough to spread the word about what you're doing. So it's not complicated. It's really not. And not everything is going to fit into this bucket. So today we're talking about just an advocacy strategy. I'm not saying this has to be your whole strategy. Remember off the top, I said, even if you just start to consider what I said today, you're going to start to see shifts. Okay. I'm not saying you got to rebuild the whole plan, but start to consider it. Start to consider it. It doesn't have to be complicated, but it does require intention. So my question to you is, what is one thing that you can do this week to even start this conversation? Where are we losing out on an opportunity to go deeper on that emotional spectrum? Where are we sitting just in this point of awareness? I know. I'm asking to get really real. But I don't have time in my life for people to not be real, for brands to not be real, to have the wool pulled over my eyes. You and I are both smarter than that. I don't want to part with my dollars for something that I don't really believe in. And Lord knows, when I've done that before, I feel icky. Nobody wants that. All right. Next week, next episode, super tactical. We're going to talk about this idea of simplification. I want all your media stuff to be so stinking simple. Simple equals fun. Simple equals achievable. Simple is doable. Simple is the new strategy. Yay for simple. All right, all the details on this show and how to get in touch with me and all the things in the show notes. I'm Erin Trafford. This is The Fourth Draft. Thank you so much for listening. Go out and make advocates. Advocacy iceberg. See ya.
SSN.
We know podcasts.
Find us at storystudionetwork.com.